So I guess one thing that I'm most intrigued about is the use of Lenny Bruce's story in the film, and sort of did you always know that was going to be part of the film? Was that at the inception of the film, was that something you wanted to include for historical background?
He's a good reference point at not only the good but the bad of where we are today. So as you saw in the film, it's not all bad, it's not all good, and Lenny's experience helps show the good and the bad.
Right. And I guess Gilbert. So obviously you talk about it in the film to some degree.
I thought the film was shit.
That's what I wanted to know.
I didn't really enjoy it. I thought it was a waste of time coming. Yeah.
I guess the question for you is,
Yes.
is sort of with you've gotten into trouble in the past for your comedy.
Thank God it stayed out of the press,
I know,
though.
I know. Nobody talks about it, thankfully.
That's where I've been lucky. It's like I think twice but do it anyway. Yeah.
We wanted to highlight different facets of it. And because there is so much outrage, we're saying, okay, let's touch on this, and let's touch on that, and let's touch on this. So yeah, and also we didn't want the film to be like 9 hours long.
I think outrage is rewarded handsomely, and we reward it every day, more and more, because it actually shuts up people you don't like to speak. And then we're like, just like Jim Norton was saying, like we're rewarding this behavior, and then being like, why is nobody being honest anymore? Kara, do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, I go to college campuses quite frequently now, as a comedian, but more as an advocate for creating an environment of acceptance. I always like to say it's not what you say, it's how you say it. So when I go and I'm obviously not the first person to say that, but it applies to what I'm doing with my comedy. And so even though I will say jokes that otherwise maybe in another context, someone might say, oh my God, how can you use the term Klan rally and talk about, growing up in Plano, Texas, and make it funny? Well, I'm making a point about the absurdity of it all. And that's the point of comedy. Most comedy is pointing out the absurdity of racism, of sexism, of homophobia. And unfortunately, that it's getting lost in translation a lot. But hopefully we can bring it back.
Gilbert, would you do college?
I'm
college
totally
campuses?
for racism. Yeah. So that doesn't apply to me. I've always thought it was a good idea.
Would you? Do you still play at college? Would you play gigs at colleges at this point, or are you just sort of over those?
Someone
kids?
offers me $1, I go there. It could be the American Nazi Party. And they said, we'll pay, and I'll go, okay.
Why not? Sure.
Can we get one?
Yes.
I don't know how much you guys have seen about what's going on at Yale, but a professor, a lecturer named Eric Christakis, sent out a really hyper-reasonable email saying, you know what? And this has been years. For years, campuses have been telling students that they how they should dress on Halloween. Even going back to like Syracuse in 2010, where the chief of police creepily told people that not only would you be brought up on charges if you were found wearing an offensive costume, you'd be forced to take it off, which is like a pretty crazy image if you think about it. And so we've seen this for years. And so Eric Christakis wrote something saying that, should we really be telling students what they should wear? Are we their parents? Is this our role? Aren't you autonomous? Can't you settle this stuff yourself? Can't you decide what offends you? And it was really thoughtful. And you would have thought that she had committed an atrocity by the response to it. It was absolutely, completely disproportionately out of control. And I was on the ground to watch this and watch these people who were just trying to actually provoke a discussion. My message to Yale is Yale has to actually get its act together and say these professors, for doing what professors should do, should not face any risk to their job. But this has definitely been, in some ways, the most disheartening week I've ever for free speech on campus that I've seen probably in my career. So the idea that this is coming out this week is kind of amazing.
I'm not a parent. I know a lot of parents in my generation spare no effort to make sure that their kids are never exposed to anything risky, dangerous, hostile, offensive, upsetting, not even a setback. And you do have to wonder that when these kids get into social situations where they're exposed to stuff like this, how they're going to react. And apparently now we know. They don't like it, and some of them seem to think they're entitled not to have to deal with it. So maybe that's part of it, but I don't know.
I wrote a really depressing short book called Freedom from Speech, where I think that as people get more comfortable, as people get better able to surround themselves in their echo chambers, as people get better able to insulate themselves from pain and be entirely surrounded with people who agree with them, they get less able to cope with a disagreement. So my sad theory is essentially that unless we do something about this is a problem that's just going to keep getting worse. I actually tend to agree with Jim Norton on that. We have to learn, we have to actually desensitize ourselves to a degree and learn how to actually talk as a pluralistic, multicultural society through training, but we're training people exactly in the other direction.
I think there is an unpleasant element of power involved in this too. First of all, not all students are part of this phenomenon. I'd have to guess, and I will ask Greg, but I think probably the majority of students think this is as stupid as we do, or very nearly so. And those who are leading the censorship crusades are also on a power trip. If they can set the rules for what everybody else is allowed to hear and say, that's intoxicating. That's power. And there's an element of that in there, especially if you can get the president fired, among other things.
You made a really excellent point in the film about, you know, that, what did you call it, the frost or the freeze, when people, the chilling effect, when people don't say anything. So it's really, it's kind of the whole like parenting thing, like who's responsible for kids not being, it's everybody's responsibility. It's everybody's responsibility to say something when they see someone being attacked for something that is ludicrous. It's everybody's responsibility not to shut up when, you know, you see someone being bowled over for something crazy. If you really believe in free speech, you have to use it.
And especially when you disagree with the point of view of the person voicing that opinion. Yep.
Freedom of speech is both the most successful and the most counterintuitive proposition in the history of the human species. There has never been a time when it is intuitively accepted, and there never will be. We have to get up every single morning forever and make this case against people who think, why should I have to put up with that shit? But here's the good part. We have been doing that in this country since the Alien and Sedition Act and making progress, and we will continue to make progress.